Welcome. I'm Stacy, and this is Matt. And today our guest is Bo Dombrowski, and she is a tarot card reader in Auburn. So we're gonna talk to her a little bit about what she does. So Bo, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So tell me a little bit about how you got into tarot card reading.
So I had gone to see a medium, Amy Diggins, in Auburn after my son had passed away. And after a couple of readings, she was teaching a tarot class. And I said, okay, why not? And I just fell in love, never put the cards down after that. So I find it a good avenue and path to kind of work through issues sometimes in the beginning, especially with grief. And I just never put the cards down since.
That's amazing. So you felt there was a calling there for sure.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
And when
That's
somebody
awesome.
goes to see you, what's the goal, or what's the outcome, desired outcome?
The goal.
Because I know nothing about what you do.
Okay, so the tarot cards will reflect what is going on in your life or paths that you may be on. And if you're not sure about certain things, if you have choices and decisions, sometimes you need a little insight or a reflection, and the cards will reflect if you choose A, your path can go this way. If you choose B, it can go that way. And so it gives people options in decision making. Some people are looking for validation of things they may believe are going around and going on around them in their environment with family, and the cards can validate. Or they can also let you know that maybe you're overthinking it, or it's not as huge as you may think it is. So love, career, finances, and they want to know where they may be in life, in their spiritual paths, financially. So it's a validation, I'd like to say.
I've also heard it referred to as self-psychiatry, like back in, when tarot cards were first formed. Can you give us a little history about how tarot came about and, things like that?
So it started out as a game, and I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it correctly, Tarachi. So it was a card game. And then someone created the deck with pictures on them, which are familiar to all of our subconsciouses. So you can look at a picture and either get a good feeling or a bad feeling, and we as humans all have that in our brain. Okay. So if you wanted to use it as self-psychiatry, you can ask, for example, what is something that is holding me back from moving forward spiritually? And you can pull a card and let's see what happens to come out. And this would be one that would tell me I might be focusing too much on my material of what's around me and making money and what I'm doing presently physically on this earth instead of spiritually. So I would have to turn my focus more towards my spirit instead of what I'm actually doing with health, wealth, resources, and things that are tangible, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That's really interesting. So we were talking about possibly doing a reading today, so would you be comfortable doing that?
Sure.
And we can kind of talk through what some of the cards are with tarot, and you know a lot more than I do. I know basics because I've done it in the past, and I'm fascinated with tarot decks and things like that. Maybe talking about the different spreads and what they might look like and what they may answer for, somebody who is going to be going to you to have a question, say about love or about career or any number of things that might come up.
Okay. So do either of you have a question that you wanted to ask to see what may come up?
What is our show gonna look like?
The one that we're doing
We're
right
just
now?
starting now.
We're just
Matt and I are starting to kind of work together and things like that. So let's take a peek at that.
Sure.
So I'll pull 3 cards to see where you may be now, where it's going, and what possibly issues or things to look forward to. So the first card tells me that you're starting to build your own relationship together in this business, and I get that there's more comfort that needs to be attained between the two of you and a relationship. When I look at the second card, this may be what is coming, and this is one of comfort and feeling comfortable and feeling at home and kind of feeling, I want to say, secure in a lot of different areas for your working relationship.
Yeah.
And then the last card, which is the Lovers, most people think it talks about marriage and relationships. Most of the time it's about choices. And so it's a series choices where you weigh your heart and logic as to what makes sense. So you both may have ideas that you may come together. You may have the approach of, I would really like to do this. This would be, great. It's scientific. And you may come with the attitude of having heartfelt issues that you may want to talk about here. And so it's the two of you kind of combining those choices. So that's the path that I see it heading. So it looks pretty good to me. And so if you find yourself, I wouldn't say at odds, but coming from two different directions, it actually works well together. So that's what I get from here.
Now, is there any reason, I mean, I'm looking at the deck and I'm hoping you guys can see this at home. Some cards are upside down, some are right side up. Is there any kind of significance to that piece?
Yes. So if a card is reversed, I attribute it to either something that needs to be reevaluated or kind of retreat and take a step back. It's not so much the opposite of when a card is upright. So it just kind of, it's like things are slowed down a little bit or may need a little bit more work. Okay. And so that's why this very first one is reversed, because this is brand new. And so you guys are going to have to, find your way. Right. With this one being upright, it's a comforting, it's more secure, it's more stable feeling. And then the last card is reversed, which talks about, again, having to maybe, reevaluate, plan, negotiate, kind of work things through. And it's not that it's a big, huge deal to work through. It's just one of, it needs a little bit more work.
Absolutely.
And some cards that are reversed can mean that it confirm something or validate more firmly. So that I don't know if that makes sense.
And where it's new and it's kind of coming together, that's why it's, more in that kind of situation. And, different personalities and what have you.
Interesting. Okay. Well, that fits us.
Definitely.
We're going to be doing more of this together and
Absolutely.
segments as part of the show. So that's interesting. All right.
Now, what are some of the spreads that you do, like when you're actually, with a client and what have you?
So if a client does not have questions, I'll pull about 10 cards, and I'll put some in the shape that I do them. They are, I have assigned positions for them. So these two would talk the present situation, as to what may be going on in their life that they need to be made aware of. This may look confusing, but it's not to me. So they all have time placements. This would talk about this weekend, the next 3 days. How are the next three days going to go? It looks pretty good. This is a good card. This is one of feeling satisfied and kind of being, having a lot of comfort around you. This one is the next 2 weeks, and then 1 to 3 months, and this is 3 to 6 months, 1 to 3 years. And so all of these cards except this one reflect what is. It's not what the client is hoping for, wishing for, or wanting. It is. But this card is one that a client may be concerned about or worried about or not sure of. And so that would reflect, and it would, it looks like you're, have a lot of ideas, and it looks like you want to start something new. It's, everything is working in your favor, and the rest of the cards will let you know what you need to focus on to proceed in that. And then this would be your possible outcome. Okay. So depending on the path that the cards are reflecting over the next year, if the client does not like what they see, the cards will help let you know how to manipulate it to work better for you. If it looks like the path it's looking pretty good, then you just keep going with the plan. So there's free will and nothing is set in stone. This is just giving a reflection as to the way things are going. So that would be a general reading if someone didn't have any questions and they just show me, what do I need to be made aware of? Okay. And so that's what this one is. If some people come with direct questions. Is this gentleman, healthy for me or right for me? And it can kind of give you a little insight, or what are his intentions towards me? That would be love. Okay. And so the cards would reflect possibly what his intentions might be, whether they're authentic, sincere, loving, caring, sneaky,
Yeah.
can let you know. And then the client can go from there and make their own choices and decisions to see how things go.
Okay, now let's say, for example, like with your situation when your son had passed, what kind of, how does this help in that kind of a situation?
I would say if I pulled all these cards for myself, I would look at the first two cards and I can see that that's a family that's missing a child. Okay. So there's the couple who, you know, they're very loving and there's two children there, but there's actually someone missing. Mm-hmm. And so because it's reversed, yeah, my firstborn is missing. Okay. But to kind of enjoy and focus, I would look at all the other cards. What can I look forward to? Where do I need healing? What can I do to make myself, you know, move forward through my grief, not get over it? Mm-hmm. And so I would look at all those cards and put them together, and I would look for the guidance and the advice in the cards and work on that. I would probably pull one card for that as to what can I focus on today to get through today, and just deal with that one card for the day.
And how often would you recommend someone coming in for a tarot card tune-up, for lack of a better word?
For a tune-up, if life is going swimmingly and there's not a lot of issues, once a year. Mm-hmm. If you're going through changes and there's some things coming up, 6 months. Some people have a lot going on and a lot of changes and disruptions in their life, and they may come once a month. Okay. When there's something changing this weekend, or if they have court cases. Right. So if you have a lot going on, I've had someone come who was opening a business, and every 2 weeks, you know, looking for guidance, advice, properties, which would work best. So if there's a lot going on, 3 months, about 3 months.
Awesome.
And how do people get in touch with you? How do people find you?
They can find me at answers@amydiggins.com, or our phone number is 508-407-8404, and we're right in Auburn, right off of Route 290.
Great.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Bo. We really appreciate it. And,
thank you.
We'll see you all next time.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Matt Labar. I'm here today with Erica Lee. Thank you for joining me. You are a medium.
Yes, Matt, thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's an interesting topic. Want to find out, first of all, what gifts do you have, and when and how did you sort out that you had these gifts?
That's a really great question. So when I was little, my dad, actually, his parents died when he was young. And so I would see them around my Victorian house where we were growing up. And naturally, as you would expect, my parents thought it was imaginary friends, something like that. But then when I started to relay more details that I would have no way of knowing is when they realized like something unusual was kind of going on. So despite all of that early activity, I did my best to have as most of a normal childhood as I possibly could. And then it just kind of flowed from there. Like more in my teenage years, people who knew my family or knew that I just had these gifts, as we'll call it, they would approach me if they knew someone grieving or if there had been a loss. And so it just kind of evolved naturally from that. It's something I've always been really interested in and had, I guess, a natural gift for, if you could call it that.
Apparently, if you first started seeing people when you were a child, you wouldn't have had a base to have gone to books and read about this or anything like that. If that's the case, wow. That must be a double-edged sword. As you said, people thought they were imaginary friends, and how do you sort of separate that reality from what people's perspectives are?
Yeah, that's a great question too, actually, and very, very relevant, because I remember, you know, I would tell the next door neighbors, they were quite elderly when I was quite small, about, you know, the dead people that were talking to me for them and things like that. And my parents were like, you know, this really isn't normal. We should try to, you know, put a cap on this. And so as you mentioned, Matt, you know, when you're very small, you think everything's normal, right?
Sure,
it's just part of your reality. But then, you know, as I was sort of, I guess, cultured or socialized, I realized it wasn't as normal of a thing. So it became much more distinct to me when I was interacting with spirit as opposed to when I was interacting with other people. And I just mostly just sort of naturally developed this mechanism to kind of block it when I'm not using it, which comes in a lot of handy.
Oh, I'll bet. Oh, that's fascinating. That's so what you're able to connect with people who have well, some people say transition. I say go home to God. So you're able to connect with people sometimes. I mean, they show up. You don't necessarily call or at somebody's behest. And
Right, exactly.
wow, interesting. So now, what do you do with your gifts now?
So I'm a professional full-time medium. So many people will contact me because, if they're grieving or they're looking for closure or they're eager to just hear, upliftment and advice from their loved ones in spirit on the other side. And I feel really excited and happy and blessed to be able to do that. It's so rewarding for me, and also it's a fun job in a way. I mean, it can be, there can be some hard things that come up, as you would imagine, with traumatic passings and things like that, but it's very rewarding that it provides people either a sense of upliftment or healing or closure, anything like that. And of course, for me, every day's different, I'm sure, as you can imagine. So it's always interesting. It never gets boring,
Oh, that. Now, because there's television programs too about paranormal investigation and that kind of thing, where people hear something in their homes, and do you get involved with that, or do paranormal investigators contact you if they feel like, okay, we've identified that there's something going on that we don't have it's not caused by wind or whatever? Do you sometimes get involved with that kind of activity?
Absolutely. I'm definitely open to those kind of calls and messages. And many times people will contact me and they'll be distressed by what they identify as a spirit or kind of activity in their home. And then I'll go, and many times what we're experiencing when we feel like we have a haunted house or something to this effect is often like a sort of like a leftover imprint or a residue. People that are sensitive to sort of energies, they might pick up on something, like if there was a traumatic event in a house, they may just be able to be receptive to sort of the emotions surrounding that. And it's my philosophy and experience that there's never any spirit or ghost trapped in a space. It just may be that if somebody's in the space that has some degree of psychic gifts or heightened sensitivity more than the average person, that Spirit's able to sense that and therefore be in contact. So oftentimes if I go to people's houses and they're having these kinds of experiences, it may be a loved one from Spirit that wants to contact them, but they are not used to that, the people that live in the house, or they're not necessarily receptive, which is totally understandable, because if I wasn't this way as a small child, it would probably scare me too.
Sure.
So that's oftentimes what's the case, but I'm definitely open and receptive to helping people in that way as well.
One of the questions I have, because sometimes in my research and in these programs, there seem to be spirits who are either happy or pleasant, and then sometimes not so much, so that there's evil. And I do believe both travel, in ways that we cannot see. I believe I believe in good and evil, and that both can take various forms and show up. Do you deal with that? And particularly when you go into a house and there's somebody who means harm, or spirit that may mean harm, or just wants the people out, or for whatever reason. Do you deal with that kind of thing? Do you confront in some way spirits that are angry even, or?
Right, Matt, I'm so glad you asked that, because actually I've never had the experience of going to a place where there was any kind of a evil spirit or any kind of an angry spirit, but it's actually a great question to ask, because that's so prevalent in pop culture, is like that kind of an ideology. It's not anything that I've encountered, and typically when I've gone to houses and, usually any kind of thing that might feel ominous or negative is more sort of something left over from previous experiences. And when I've gone to places and I've been able to communicate with spirits that choose to connect with me while I'm in the space, oftentimes they just have information to share, they have questions, things like that. And in my experience, it's never turned out to be a kind of like evil entity or anything that wants to harm the occupants.
Okay.
They may have like a message to share or information they want to get across. But I'm glad you asked, because personally, I guess I've been fortunate. I haven't had that experience, but I know that that's something that you definitely see a lot of in literature and in TV and things like that. So it's very interesting.
Yep, and even there are priests, particularly Catholic, but other denominations as well, who are trained to be able to expel spirits from people. And you do see that on television, and you wonder sometimes on television, okay, is this, that's always the question, is this real or is this drama?
Yes.
That's created. And you wonder, at least somebody like me, who tends to be cynical in some ways, but also open to what you're talking about, what you experience. Where is the line between what's real and what is dramatic television, or
Yes, absolutely. And what's real and I also noticed too that we, even myself, can get like excited about things, and like that heightens our energy. So if you think about, if you're already scared and then you hear a noise, you're like, you jump, right? Because like you're already, like, all of your physical senses are heightened. So I feel that's like when we're in this place where we're already sort of tuned in and heightened, it's like we can pick up on more things, but also like our mind can get a little bit involved as well. You know, I was recently driving in this desolate area and I had missed my turn and I passed all these cemeteries. Now I should be the last person to be spooked, but I was feeling a little creeped out, and then I heard my car and I was like, oh, my car is making all these noises. And I was telling myself, I was like, Erica, your car is probably fine. Fortunately, we live in the era of GPS, you still have signal. So, and it's entirely possible that being that connected to nature and in this like desolate location in the middle of the night, there's no people around, there are cemeteries, like I could have been tuning in, to any spirit that may have wanted to draw close and give a message. But because I wasn't entirely open to that, and because the ambiance sort of freaked me out, it's easy to, when we're in that heightened state, we can pick up on more, but we can also create a story for ourselves too. So it's great to see like what's that fine line.
And we actually interviewed some investigators.
Oh, cool.
And one of the things they said is, they'll go into a house and people are freaking out because they hear, and they find out that there's an old heating element that's got paper that has worn away in front of it, and that's what the sound was. But that's what you're talking to. Sometimes our minds play tricks.
Yes.
But sometimes there's a reality, and it's hard, I would think, unless you're open to it and trained in some way or used to it. I don't know how you trained to do this. How did you train or train yourself to be able to connect this way? How did you do that?
So I feel I trained myself in the way of like sort of turning it on and turning it off, just because of the childhood experience I was talking about. But I did seek out additional like extensive training. There is a well-known location in England. It's called Arthur Findlay College. It's very cool. It's like an old baronial estate where you just stay for a week and learn about mediumship. And in fact, the locals in England call it Spook Hall. So that's a fun place. I've been there several times, and I've had a few mentors that were like well-known famous mediums, and it's interesting to get their perspective, to hear their philosophy, their experiences, and to, they have like a wealth of knowledge to draw on to give exercises and things like that. And I have a few students myself that, you can tune into your natural gifts and then find different ways to sort of harness them and heighten them and fine-tune it. So it's definitely something that you can have training in, and it's my philosophy that it exists on a spectrum, right? So I feel like what I always say to people is everyone can learn to play football. Maybe not everyone will be Tom Brady, but there is the potential for everybody. So it's definitely something that you can fine-tune and harness.
Wow. Well, that's great. This has been fascinating, and we could sit here and have a whole litany of questions. But I really want to thank you for coming and sharing what your experience has been. And I'm as I said, very open to this, and have learned a little bit more about it. And see where that takes us. So thank you very much for coming.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much, Matt, for having me. It was awesome to get to chat to you and hopefully answer some questions that have, given people more info. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, great. Thank you.